Marlene, may I start with you?
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much. If we were to look back a decade at the supply chains for your firm, obviously one of the largest in the world in your sector, how would it look like compared to today? Or tell us how do these supply chains that you've built look like versus a decade ago? If you could just draw out a couple of things that are different and presumably more sustainable about them.
I think the best way is to give you some concrete examples, John. So let me go. We're talking about supply chain a decade ago. Maybe let me just fast forward where I am right now and draw the picture. So coming out of the need of having business continuity post the ESCOM debacle of load shedding, we've had to go off the grid and officially totally off the grid since last year. So we first went onto solar, then onto combined heat and power, and the next step in the consideration, of course, is biogas. Now, why did we have to do that? Yes, it's business continuity, and yes, it's also better for our carbon emissions. Gas not better than, I guess, something more greener like biofuels, but certainly better than coal. When you're dealing with a live product coming from an industry like Danone, you're using live cultures, you cannot afford to actually have a power dip at all. Yeah. This means you need a continuous production, and therefore power is absolutely critical, because you then have a net loss of food waste where you have to dump that food. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we are acutely aware, and someone quoted the stats of the pressure of scope 3 emissions on an industry. And so we have made a conscious decision to bring and source all our ingredients and packaging locally. We are up to 90% of sourcing ingredients and packaging locally.
Because to put it fairly unscientifically, you deal with a lot of cows.
We do. That's the primary ingoing ingredient of dairy. And we acknowledge that cows have a problem to solve insofar as methane.
Or you have a problem to solve with the cows.
We do. And we take full responsibility to be part of the solve. So
what specifically have you...
What have we done? So firstly, with the cows, we know the feed is very important to help reduce methane gas. So there's some investigations and research and so forth, but we've already started with bowl feed, to adjust the methane emissions. We cannot get rid of methane emissions. It is what it is, but we are going to try and reduce it. Now, cows posed another problem for us in Danone. All the cows were located in the Midlands, that beautiful green space of South Africa. Now, when we travel or when we bring that milk up every single day, it's incurring carbon footprint again in terms of the logistics costs. We moved just over 2,000 cows, to the south of Johannesburg, so we could reduce that carbon emission. So it seems bizarre to do, and some people might say, how could you? The cows are really healthy, they're really happy, and they're living in the south of Johannesburg. But certainly, they don't have a different accent. They just...
In journalism, the rule is you always have to double source every story. So I'm not sure I can double source it with the cattle, but I will take your word for it.
So I just we try as much, not just local sourcing. We try to do proximity sourcing. We moved packaging that was being produced in Sun City closer. It's now produced in Germiston, and our factory is in Boksburg. We have flavor houses that were producing flavors internationally. They've now developed an entire research arm to produce these flavors locally.
And just on the local sourcing, let me bring Pamela in because, and here I should probably declare my own interest. You make a gin that my mother drinks probably by the gallon load. It's called over like a large period of time, called Inverroche, and it's famous for using lots of kind of South African flavors. But is that something you're doing because ultimately that's what the market wants, and the fact that it's all dealing with kind of lovely Feinboss plants is an added bonus? I mean, is this kind of push for local things just because that's what gin drinkers like my mother want, or is it actually pushed by the sustainability motivations?
John, you're making me thirsty now, from milk to alcohol to Inverostion. No, the good thing about Pernod Ricard is that they've always done sustainability initiatives.
And what's Malarica, sorry?
Pernod Ricard.
Okay, Pernod Ricard.
Yeah,
sorry.
our company. Most of you know us better by Jameson, Glenlivet, and Inverosh. But we've always done that sustainability throughout. And now recently, it's a EU regulation for us to report. So I'm very proud to say that the company's been doing it throughout the value chain. And now we align to the Sustainable Development Goals, World Health Organization. So we have 4 pillars as Pernod Ricard. One pillar is responsible consumption, but that's underage drink driving and binge drinking and so forth. But the ones more for sustainability is called nurturing terroir, which means taking care of our land. Value in people, because we have to take care of the people to ensure that things are done in a sustainable way. And then circular making, which is the reuse, recycle. But coming back to Inverosh in particular, we don't have much local production, but we're very proud to have a local production. And I think when the founder of Inverosh created it, it was about taking care of the Feinboss biodiversity within the Stilbaai area, but more importantly about creating jobs and value creation in a sustainable way for all of the community around the area.
And how do those EU rules bite? Because I think for many people it's like an underappreciated pressure point on sustainability. I was doing a reporting trip in Madagascar just before they had their protests, and I was up in a village that produces cocoa. It's the kind of it's the Grand Cru of cocoa, this particular valley in Madagascar. And the ladies that were growing the cocoa were saying to me, we can make an extra 10-15% if we can sell the cocoa through these sustainability EU approved rules. But it's very arduous in terms of kind of the reporting standards and things like that. Like what specifically does it mean that you're doing that you might otherwise not be doing?
So, like I said, Pernod was always doing this stuff, but I think the difficulty is now to get employees from across the value chain to now focus on actual reporting and portfolio of evidence. So when we talk about water consumption, energy, waste production, circular making, all of that needs to be reported with a portfolio of evidence. And I think for some of us who are in the teams of sustainability, yes, we are much more advanced, but to get the entire business across HR, finance, wherever you're sitting within this value chain, to now do your full day job and then get a portfolio of evidence. It has been a challenge, but I can happily say that South Africa and Africa as well has been one of the best practices to the rest of the Pernod global world.
Let's bring Mike and Claire in, because you obviously have experience working directly with smallholders and the farmers themselves. When we were chatting, I would say backstage, it sounds more glamorous, with just the same room, but with a door. Michael, you were speaking about, I guess, the haves and the have-nots in the industry and the perhaps additional burdens that some of these sustainability requirements might put on the little guys when it comes to supply chain. Can you just speak a little bit to that in Bonsucro's experience?
Yeah, so I think that what's quite important is sustainability is complex, and you've heard from the previous 2 speakers, and if you look at the people in this room, there's a huge amount of knowledge here. What we do at Bonsucro is we have voluntary sustainability standards. So we take some of the pain that's being talked about out of the system. We create the standard, we create a framework for collecting data and collecting information and verifying the sustainability of the sugar industry. So we are just in the sugar industry. I think for me, what's really important in the African context is that because we set these bars high, and they should be set high, and the consumer is demanding sustainable production, we have a very real risk of creating a world of haves and have-nots. So if you have the resources to be able to achieve these things, then we will create a relationship with the Danons or the Pernod Ricards of the world. And suddenly you will have preferred suppliers because they can achieve. And the smallholders will start regressing. And we'll start creating inequality an unintended consequence. So I think for us, what's really important is understanding that in the first instance, and then taking some sort of stepwise approach to the sustainability journey. So meet people where they are and work with them and get leadership from institutions, from society, from people that have the knowledge, people in this room, and walk that step. So we're very, very aware of that. And we have both a production standard and a smallholder standard to be able to accommodate that.
I was going to ask, because how do you overcome that? I mean, it strikes me as not being particularly sustainable if essentially you're driving the poorest farmers out of business. But I'm also conscious that if you're a voluntary standard or a private firm, there's only so much you can do. Like, do you have any specific examples of where you've managed to kind of turn some have-nots into haves?
So I think the really important thing is you don't want to condone bad behaviors. So understand what are the non-negotiables. And what we've seen, and you asked the question, what's changed in the last 10 or 15 years, those non-negotiables are around human rights, labor conditions. Those are non-negotiables. Those can get taken out of the system through training and through mentorship. So we have a set of non-negotiables around human rights, deforestation, as the first bit. I think the second bit is creating partnerships. This thing can't be done alone. And just as a little aside, I'm very honored to be sharing the stage with Danone, because last week, and we pushed really hard so that we could announce it here, the very first sugar mill in South Africa, in mainland Africa, was Bonsucro certified. And that started as an initiative of Danone 8-10 years ago. It's taken time, but it was a real achievement. So it's about partnership. So it's partnering where people are. And that's exactly what a brand like Danone did, and walked with the sugar industry in Eswatini on that really tough journey. And then we can start looking at some of the other things. We can then start looking at greenhouse gas footprints. We can start looking at some of the other things to a point where people are ready for certification. So that's really what our approach has been: develop the stepwise through partnerships to drive change on the sustainability journey.
And Claire, maybe you could give us a bit of an explanation as to real gardening, what it is you do, and then how it fits into some of these conversations, especially around how kind of the people that are working on the ground kind of quite literally fit into some of these, can be quite high-level discussions about sustainability.
Yeah, so I think our organization is very grassroots level. We started 15 years ago, focused solely in the food security space, but at an education level, so at a school level, and worked a lot with enabling children to understand where food came from, connection with the soil, obviously with the key point of nutrition, access to micronutrients, on a quest to reduce the levels of stunting. And it's very evident that in the communities in which we were working, where food security, local food security systems were established, they did not suffer as much during COVID as those where there wasn't food security established at a household level. So that drove us to start working with households to become food secure. And organically, as our program started to grow, once a household was food secure, they started to ask how they could now make money off growing food at a backyard level or at a communal level. And then we started to be confronted with a lot of the conversations that we've just had with regards to, okay, well, where is the market and how do we access that, and what is that collective look? What does that collective look like to be able to create long-term sustainable food supply systems within the rural communities that we serve.
So where are you working?
So we work nationally in South Africa, every single province. We started with our household program at the tail end of COVID, so 2021. We're now in 100,000 households. And we then started about 2 years ago our smallholder farmer program, and we've got 6,000 smallholder farmers that we work with. And in some of the areas, Dalmas, for instance, is one of the most impoverished communities in this country. We don't talk about it enough, but it really is. Working with those women to be able to get them to a point that they're not now struggling to understand who goes to bed hungry in their household. They're now combining their efforts and selling their lettuce to their local KFCs. And it's really fundamental. Food security is the core of what we should be talking about in all conversations, because it really is the factor that is keeping people from realizing their potential, and in doing so, their community's earning potential, and the knock-on effect is evident in every single sector.
Before I just ask a quick follow-up, everyone in this room will probably know more about the subject than I will. So if you do have a question, you can apparently put it on some gizmo, which I can see here. I say a gizmo, it's like it's a giant TV screen, isn't it? Or you can do it the old-fashioned way if you want to raise your hand and just so you know, maybe let those thoughts percolate. Sorry, Michael. Just one. The question about the lettuce, or the yogurt pots, or the gin, or the sugar. Sorry to be a boring economist journalist here, but what happens to the price of these goods when they're made in this sustainable way? With fantastic story, I'm sure it's doing great work. But does that mean I'm paying more, or KFC is paying more for its lettuce, and then they'll have a knock-on effect on my chicken burger?
No, so the wonderful thing is it's actually the complete reverse. And that the KFC is paying less, they're getting a fresher product, okay? But then that money that KFC is spending is now spent locally within that community to have the knock-on effect, a multiplier of local economic creation.
Okay, so then why isn't everyone doing this?
Right?
No, I asked the questions, guys. So, so Michael, you didn't want to make.
So why isn't everyone doing it? I think that just to take a step back, I don't think people have the confidence to do it. So I think one of the things that has frustrated me, and I mentioned it earlier, 8 years ago, we started the journey of sustainability, of certification with the Eswatini industry. They didn't believe in themselves. They didn't believe that they were world class. And everything I said to them, guys, you're really, really good. They just didn't believe it. And it's one of the problems in Africa. We don't believe enough in ourselves. So we think we're going to fail. So we actually don't try. But yeah, I think two points. Undoubtedly, sustainability is good for business. It's an investment in the future. I think one thing for me, though, is that you have to be assured of your survival today to start thinking about a better tomorrow. That's really, really key. So food security, I've often pushed food security as the first entry point into the discussion about sustainability, and often encouraged sugar producers to look at communities and to look at food security to ensure their survival. There's a continuum. It's survive, grow, thrive, certify. And to get there, you have to be assured of survival today. Because if you're going to say to someone, we need to invest a lot of money for a better tomorrow, the response is, I don't even know if I'm going to be alive. That's the reality. So this food security as an anchor is really important to me.
And John, I think it's a misnomer. Oh, sorry, were you interested? I think it's a misnomer that it's all about cost in, and therefore it must be passed to the consumer. The benefit is vast. We've just spoke about product loss or transport being minimized, transport costs being minimized. So it's not necessarily a thing that adds on, a cost to the end product. I guess you also need to know that consumers don't expect you to raise the cost. They actually expect this to be a passport factor. They expect industries, and particularly large industries like Danone, to be doing the right thing. So this is really a misnomer. It's about value in. Consumers want that. Pricing on what you see on the shelves is really what a P&L statement dictates. It's not about the price of solely coming out of a sustainability initiative.
Thanks. I wanted to add, John, that it's also like we have farmers, especially the small holding farmers, who have so much of produce and they can't get it sold or given to. And then on the other side, we have people who don't have food. Then it comes down to the lack of skill, maybe expertise, maybe resources, technical equipment and technology. And this just reminded me of a project that we're doing at Pernod. It's called the Agricultural Research Hub, where we've got a supplier to do a full scoping of the agricultural process in South Africa, working with the Agricultural Research Council as well. And besides the desktop research and the insights that they put into the table, they're also doing interviews with experts. And their findings, which it's not complete as yet, but some of their findings are quite simple, practical steps that we can take, but we're trying to package it so that farmers, have a full value chain of being sustainable, but also being profitable in the process. And some of the problems that they picked up was like maybe with the Inverosh plant, how we can expand for the entire community to benefit from alien vegetation, looking at that biodiversity within the community. Another one was a challenge of funding. How can we be more proactive as a society to get funding into the farmers? And the other one is what my colleague has mentioned, partnerships, both locally and globally. And I think sessions like this is so meaningful for us because when you lobby outside, you find that everyone can contribute in some way or the other.
Would anyone like to allow me to outsource my job for 2 minutes? Or I do have another question, which is, it goes to what you were saying, Michael, about perhaps a kind of untapped desire to present yourself as world class if you're on the continent. There's on a much grander level, one of the reasons why productivity in agriculture writ large has struggled.
You, Michael.
I'm looking at all of you. I'm looking at all of you as you go on. So is because of this kind of struggle to do more than just produce the basic kind of raw material. And there are some promising examples, whether it's kind of cashews in Ivory Coast or wherever, chocolate in Madagascar, of kind of presenting your product as a premium product, but one that's made on the continent. What could you do as kind of international firms to help African kind of agricultural producers, kind of defined broadly, tap into that potential markets? Because we've talked a lot, I guess, about how to improve the functioning of local markets, make them more sustainable. But to really for food, for beverages to kind of be a big export market as well, they're going to need to kind of tap into more the international consumer as well.
Yeah, so if you're talking particularly about local versus exports.
But I mean, how many of the Danone yogurts, or yogurts is obviously a bad example, but products that you might find in shelves outside of South Africa would contain maybe kind of South African or African ingredients? Like if you were to go to supermarkets in Dubai or Europe or something like that.
So are we exporting our own ingredients to the rest of the market? I firmly believe it's local supply, local demand. We have a food insecurity issue right here at this point in time. So whatever ingredients we have, let's service our own market first. And then consider the rest of the market. But most companies will always diversify. Yeah, they will always diversify their route to market, their different channel strategy, just in terms of what margins they could benefit from other markets. But definitely, we have a moral obligation to address food insecurity in South Africa. when you're looking at exports, we typically for Danone looking at the Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, Swaziland area. It's not a big percentage of what we export. It's about 11 to 13%. And so we largely focusing on our local markets.
Yeah.
I think the sugar industry is an interesting industry, and there's a lot of politics involved there. But a real success story is around Mauritius. Mauritius had 19 sugar mills. They rationalized to 3. At the same time, the industry made a commitment to sustainability. They made a lot of noise about we will be 100% sustainable, sustainably certified. And on the back of that, people buying sugar in Europe sat up and started taking notice. They can't supply enough sugar now. So on the back of that, they also diversified their product, specialty sugars, and they've actually created a sugar of origin trademark in Mauritius. But they wouldn't have been able to do that if they weren't certified sustainable. So that's how that journey can lead to
And
market
then that
access.
brand has some cachet. Let me just pick up on one of the questions here and direct it to Claire. What are we haven't used a couple of words here that I think many people in the room may be familiar with, which are kind of organic and biodynamic. Your experience of helping the farmers in South Africa, I mean, are these words that come up, or I mean, is it not something that is germane to the people you're working with?
So I'm going to answer that, but I also how to balance hunger and empty calories, I think, is also very, very critical, and they work together. So
There's two questions. Thank you very much. There's one about just the extent of hunger, and you might explain what the kind of the 0 calories things are, and then there's another about
the biodiversity.
how what we've been talking about pertains to organic and biodynamic farming.
Yeah. So in the areas we work, main reason why people aren't growing their own food is either they honestly don't know how, it's completely been lost, it's not being passed down, it is a symptom of where we have come from as a society, or they have tried in the past and failed due to multiple of reasons. Most of it is lack of water and ability for that crop to grow, and then the actual soil condition and the additional needs for nutrients for that crop. So when we work with the community, our garden in a box kit is pre-packed according to the area. The seeds are all open pollinated. We work to teach permaculture principles, but in really simple, like almost paint by numbers situation, where we're saying, you don't have to become an agronomist, but we're going to give you the skills to grow your plants with what you already have. You don't have to now go and buy fertilizers and additional pesticides. What that means is it becomes an organic product. You're working within the biodiversity. We look at creating a better soil environment, bringing the pollinators in. In doing that, you're actually creating a better crop, a higher nutrient value crop at a lower cost, but it is deemed to be a more expensive product. Where these communities that we work in, a huge problem, which is empty calories, we call it hidden hunger. So it's children that are going to bed with a full tummy, but what is currently in their tummy is taking more from their body to digest than it is actually giving their body to grow. We run when we go.
So what kind of things would they have eaten?
So when we go into a community, we do a dietary diversity questionnaire across all of our beneficiaries. We do a baseline survey, and then when we start to work on the program, we start to track the different intake, how communities going to bed hungry and so on. But in that dietary diversity questionnaire, in 99% of the communities we work in, the 3 things that those families are constantly eating is pap, oil, sunflower oil, and sugar. Those are the three main things that those children are being fed. The current complete stats across every community we work in is that at best case, those families are getting 85 grams of vegetables and fruit. World Health Organization deems bare minimum for you to literally just survive, not thrive, at 440 grams per day. So our best case scenario in the communities we go into, those families are less than a quarter of what they should be deemed minimum by the World Health Organization. And those households are running out of money. 65% of them are running out of money by the third Tuesday in the month, to the point where there is no more money. And that's the crisis. So when we go into these communities and you're able to teach people to work with the assets they have at their disposal, we've got beautiful sunlight, we're able to teach them how to grow with 80% less water. That means that we're able to work in areas where they're really using grey water that they have at their disposal to grow vegetables, to then start to thrive as a community. We then start to see the cycle where they're starting to feed into other elements where they can start to think about themselves as a collective and talk about, well, where are we going to sell, or what is this market, or what do we want? But you can't get anyone to that point where they can have confidence over their ability if they're sitting at a quarter of what the World Health Organization deems the bare minimum. I'm very passionate about this.
No, it's well done. And there's a relevant question here too as well, which is about bridging the gap between the amount of food waste that you would find at retailers or restaurants and the stark picture that you've outlined as well. I know we don't have a retailer here, but I mean, just wondering if either of you ladies could speak to any examples that you've come across about efforts to bridge that gap.
So I think we have the worst problem compared to you because we have a short shelf life product.
Everyone drinks the gin.
Yeah, precisely. So having a short shelf life product poses a lot of problems. And the retailers also want us to remove product off their shelves 5 days before it goes to the best before date. Because consumers pick it up, they turn it upside down, they look at the best before date, and then they will reject it. Even though we know that eating a yogurt well after its best before date is quite fine. There's a whole long conversation to be had here about best before and expired, which are two different things. So that food waste is significant, and it results in food waste, actually, which we can then either compost. We don't take that food waste back into any of our food banks. Anything that sits in a warehouse can go to a food bank, but that then gets composted. But it's a significant quantity of money that's lost. And the only way we will get better at it is if we have fining. We have a global planning system, a GPS system. If we can better forecast that demand, we'll get better at waste. And then the second thing is just educating our consumers. Sniff, taste, see. If it's good enough, it's good enough to eat, actually.
Why don't you just get rid of these best before dates then? Seems like a bit of a silly idea.
There's a lot of legislation in place right now in draft that we are looking at, but it also goes in with education to the consumer. Stop wasting.
From our side, we have a program called the Bar World of Tomorrow, where we train all of the bartenders not to waste, not even the ice or the garnishes. But also, interestingly, the gap between the food shortages, we encourage restaurant owners to take care of the communities rather than wasting. And even radio stations to advertise it widely as to where can people get that food and not waste it.
Right. Well, this gives me enough time to thank our 4 panelists for a fantastic discussion, and also for yourselves for listening. Oh, we have one old-fashioned hand here, but we are running out of time, so make it quick.
Can you please put up the link for the questions so that we can ask questions via the
Oh my word, I should have known this already. I'm sorry. Right. Can we fix that, please?
The slider,
Okay. We will fix the slider. Thank you very much. I feel so bad. My apologies. Free newspapers outside for you. And round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, well done. Well done.
That went